Market Journal, television for agricultural business decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine.
Hello everyone, I'm Troy Moling and thanks for joining us today on Market Journal. Hope everyone has had a great week. We've got another jam-packed show ahead for you today. And beginning the broadcast, we often focus on how feed prices might impact a producer's bottom line and on how feed quality may affect an animal's performance. But it's important to remember the water demands that come with raising cattle too, and understanding what your herd's water footprint means. UNL's Andrea Watson is an expert in ruminant nutrition and spoke with me about what we need to know in managing our cattle's water efficiency.
You know, it takes a lot of water, and we're talking 650,000 gallons maybe to produce one animal. Now you got to take into consideration that's the cow out there for an entire year grazing grass and consuming water, plus that calf then maybe getting backgrounded into the feedlot. And so yeah, it's a big number, but when we break it down relative to what's produced by each of those animals.
And percentage-wise, where does that fall if we're looking at maybe a pie chart as far as the percentages for that water use, and maybe what are some of those ideal percentages?
Yeah, so some of the data that we've pulled together, it's maybe 50% of that water is going to the cow, right? If you think about her out there for a year, and then the other 50% would go to the calf as they're backgrounded, if they are or not, or the feedlot, really depending on how many days they're in the feedlot, the efficiency, their daily gain at that point.
Where have you found that producers are using too much water or maybe not enough water?
Well, really anything we can do to improve efficiency, whether that's grazing efficiency, so better using our rangelands, or efficiency in the feedlot phase, right? Fewer days on feed with the same end carcass weight. Anything we can do on those two sides really directly impacts our water use and would reduce our water use.
And then I guess it would also, depending on what part of the state you're in, maybe different regulations, because I know that in some parts of the state you're going to have restrictions on how much water that can be used. How does that come into play?
Absolutely. So one real key thing is the type of water that we're talking about. So there's green water, blue water, and gray water. So green water is simply rainfall. And it's important to know that about 86%, so 80 to 90% of this total water footprint that we're talking about is actually just rainwater. The remainder then would be mostly blue, which is ground surface water, typically irrigation water, right? And a little bit of gray water. And so as you move east to west, your rainfall would decrease. And then also it's important to take into consideration irrigation, right? Kind of following the Platte River Valley and things, irrigation, because again, about 98% of this total water goes to grow the crops instead of actually going to the animals themselves for drinking, processing, different things. And so as you move east to west, just being really efficient with your water, because we have less of that rainwater, becomes more important.
And finally, what are some tools that farmers can use to be more efficient with their water and just overall be good stewards in the environment?
You know, it really comes back to grazing the crops, because that's where the biggest bulk of this water footprint is. It's the feeds that they're consuming, the water that was used to grow those. So the irrigation technologies that we have now, whether that's better crops that are growing on dry land to have higher yields, or the improved irrigation efficiencies, all of those things will directly impact then our water footprint for cattle production as well.
You can find more on this and other beef topics at beef.unl.edu. Let's get a check on the markets now, and DTN grain market analyst Todd Hultman joined me from Omaha on Tuesday. Lots to discuss this week. Farmers are looking to plant more corn than soybeans this year, so what impacts could that have? Plus, there might be some selling strategies you'll want to consider. We'll look at that. But first, Todd estimates corn, soybeans, and wheat suffered a loss last year of about 15 million acres, and returning those acres to production could present some hurdles.
Yeah, and that's a big concern, and that puts a big focus on what our spring weather's going to be like. So my best sketch right now for what 2020 might look like is I don't expect much change in the wheat acres, so I think that 15 million loss is going to be split somehow between corn and wheat. My guess is we'll get about 11 million acres of production out of the 15 back.
What would you say is your price forecast for corn, soybeans, and wheat?
Yeah, so why not make the prediction here at the start of the year? For corn, since we're still looking at an outlook of having a carry out of around 2 billion bushels, give or take 1 or 200 million bushels, it's hard to expect prices to be any different than what we've seen the past 5 years. So for cash corn, I'm estimating a range from $3 on the low end to about $3.90 on the high end. That's kind of a normal range that corn can trade in a year. And of course, the lower prices are anticipated at harvest time, and usually we see the higher prices in early summer.
Do you have any selling strategies that we should be thinking about right now?
Yeah, they're year long. And of course, for the 2019 crop, fortunately, we started off with some early forward sales of about 50% of production and caught some higher prices then. But now we still have 50% of that crop to sell, as well as thinking about new crop for the 2020 season. The way things are priced right now, I don't see any urgency to run out there and lock in a price. We did catch 25% of production in October when the new crop corn price was a little higher. And so anything on the December corn that we could get around 405 or 4010, I think is probably a fairly good price given the type of outlook we have in front of us. Of course, there can always be surprises. On the case of soybeans, we're so drastically undervalued right now compared to where cash soybeans should be for the carryout that we're showing right now. I just don't see a good pricing opportunity in soybeans, which means we're going to have to wait and hope that the market starts to recognize that we've got a lower soybean supply than we've seen the past couple of years.
And another thing, Todd, when we were exchanging emails before this interview, you mentioned how many of the folks that you've spoken with are looking to plant more corn than soybeans this year. So break that down for us, those numbers, and explain to us why that could have a bearish outcome for corn.
Yeah, so good points. I was really hoping one of the benefits, Troy, of Phase 1 agreement would be that it would inspire more confidence in our U.S. soybean demand and give us a better soybean price and encourage some more soybean planting this spring. Well, the market just isn't reacting that way so far, and quite frankly, because of the wording of the agreement, we don't have a lot of confidence in just how many soybeans China will buy. And of course, if they do buy them now, it's probably going to be at the tail end of the calendar year, not in time for spring planting. So that puts a bigger burden on corn. And as you mentioned, I've talked around and asked folks what they're leaning for planting this year. And so far, the folks I've talked to from different parts of the country seem to still be favoring more corn than soybeans. The way I see it, an early planting outlook, I'm looking for about 85 million acres of soybeans, which gives us basically a neutral outlook as far as meeting demand in the 2020 season. But for corn, we're looking at 92 million acres of plantings. And unfortunately, we don't have demand for that much corn at this point. We have a demand for about 89 million acres of plantings, but 92 or anything higher than that is going to add to the ending stocks total that we're already looking at near 2 billion bushels.
And Todd, I know you were also speaking at the National Farm Machinery Show earlier this month. I know you were getting lots of questions, lots of great insights from the producers there. What were some of the big takeaways from that event?
Well, I think the big focus, Troy, there's a lot of uncertainty about how this planting season's going to go. And Bryce Anderson, our meteorologist, talked in front of me about the spring weather outlook. And right now, the 90-day forecast for springtime still looks quite wet for the northern Midwest and the eastern Midwest. That's not a great outlook where we have such a heavy amount of saturated soil concentration throughout the Corn Belt already this year. So there's a lot of concern about, are we going to even be able to plant the types of acres that I was mentioning to you earlier? That's a huge question mark. And even in Louisville, Kentucky, folks were wondering quite a bit about that. The other thing I think everybody's wondering about is just what is the Phase 1 trade agreement going to mean in terms of actual exports? And so we talked a lot about the details, what the agreement is and what it's not. And quite frankly, it's a very tough call to know how this is going to play out this year in terms of exports.
And finally, we might not talk to you again before spring rolls around, so do you have any marketing or risk management decisions that we need to be thinking about now, maybe something that you haven't mentioned yet?
Yeah, I would just keep an eye on the new crop futures, or excuse me, the new crop cash prices at your local elevators. Keep track of that and see if you can get a little better opportunity. Typically, our grain markets are fairly quiet now through April, and the excitement doesn't kind of pick up until May. But it's good to keep an eye on that quote board every day and just see if there's any surprising opportunities that get offered to you. Also, this is the time of year when option premiums tend to be cheap. If you can find a cheap put option out there to help kind of cover some of the risk on the downside of the market, this is a good time of year to check into that. But don't ever spend too much for those option premiums, but they can be a very good form of cheap insurance if you buy them right.
Thanks again to Todd. Darren Fessler will be our analyst next week. Next up, cattlemen and crop producers are the focus of this year's Southeast Nebraska Soil Health Conference on March 3rd in Hickman. This year's theme is feeding the below ground and above ground livestock. That's going to allow attendees to learn new ideas on cover crops and soil health and use that knowledge to have a positive impact on their farm. Extension's Randy Pryor stopped by the studio to share more.
When you talk about soil health, it's not just a dirt medium. An agronomist will say a handful of soil will have more living organisms than people on Earth. We really don't fully understand everything there is to know about that below ground livestock. But when you enhance soil health, and you do this through no-till farming, through diverse crop rotations, through cover crops, and through grazing and manure, compost, and biosolids. Those are your 4 keys. And one of the biggest ways we observed are increases in agriculture over time. Think about the drought of 2012, the most extreme anomaly we've ever had in terms of heat and dryness. We had, maybe 50, 80 bushel corn yields. People say, that's a testament to plant breeding. Well, some of that, yes. Back in the 70s and 80s, that would have been a 0 yield. So I attribute much of those gains also to soil health, increasing soil organic matter, and resiliency to weather risk in agriculture. And that resiliency is going to be needed on into the future.
Once more, the Southeast Nebraska Soil Health Conference takes place on Tuesday, March 3rd in Hickman at the new community center there. The keynote speaker is Dr. Dwayne Beck of the South Dakota State University Dakota Lakes Research Farm. Other researchers and extension personnel will be giving talks too. The conference is free, but you do need to register by February 28th. You can find more information and a complete schedule of events at the web address on your screen or on the Market Journal website. It's time for this week's trivia question now, and we're talking about one of our favorite topics, corn. Here we go. How many gallons of water will an acre of corn give off per day through evaporation? Is the answer 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, or is it 4,000? Make your guess and I'll have the answer after Al's forecast. Moving on, and for the past 3 years, the University of Nebraska-Lincoln has hosted a new kind of farming competition at the West Central Research Extension and Education Center. It's one that focuses on profit and input use efficiency over yield. The Testing Ag Performance Solutions, or TAPS program's farm management competition allows participants to make management decisions on a small plot, with awards given for most profitable, highest input use efficiency, and highest yield. And new competitions have been added each year. For 2019, a subsurface drip irrigated corn competition was added. You can read about the 2019 winners and their strategies in the February Nebraska Farmer. We'll also have more on the TAPS competition on an upcoming episode of Market Journal. Time now for weather with Nebraska Extension Ag Climatologist and Market Journal Chief Meteorologist Al Dutcher. Al, February rolling right along. What's in store for the forecast this week?
Well, Troy, we've made it through the 3rd full week of February, and this last week we've seen quite a variation in temperatures. 40s and 50s widespread this last weekend, giving way to cooler temperatures during the early part of the week, and then that sudden surge of Arctic air that came in Wednesday into Thursday morning. We've seen temperatures dropping to as low as 16 below at both Broken Bow and Wayne. In terms of snowfall accumulations, there was a pocket in central Nebraska between 4 and 6 inches reported by the Anti-Rain Network. And if we go in western Nebraska, between 1 and 2 inches was fairly common, although there were some isolated pockets a little bit more than that. Further east, we basically were in the half-inch range to 1.5 inches. Not much moisture with this snow, so it was a dry snow. And now we go into this weekend, and we're going to see some at least nice temperatures the first half before conditions start to deteriorate significantly across the southern half of the state as we get into late Sunday. So now we look at the upper air pattern for today, and we have this upper air low. We haven't had to deal with one of these out of the southwest for quite a while. That is expected to move into our region as we go through the weekend. So we have low pressure at the surface stacked up in the desert southwest, one in the Texas Panhandle. This one piece of energy moving out really won't have any moisture to work with, as the main core of precipitation will remain back into the southwest. But as we get into tomorrow, this low really starts to move quickly toward the east, and that's going to open up the Gulf and start to put some moisture up into the central plains with a surface low in south central Kansas. So we should start to see precipitation breaking out during the afternoon hours along the Kansas-Nebraska border, and then moving northward during the evening hours. And that trough by Monday will broaden out as the first piece of energy starts to move toward the eastern seaboard, with the low pressure system basically centered over central Illinois. That will create basically a comma on the backside with some accumulating snowfall potentially impacting southeastern Nebraska. And on Tuesday, the GFS keeps this system fairly deep. The main low pressure system at the surface move over to the southeast as high pressure starts to build in from our northwest. So we will see some flurry activity, but the main snowfall accumulations will remain over the central and eastern Corn Belt. And on Wednesday, this trough deepens, spilling that very Arctic cold air into the east of Nebraska. Here comes that high pressure system on the backside of this low. More importantly for us, we're going to start to see the highs from the west move into our region. So even though they're showing some scattering of flurry activity, I think it's probably overdone. Thursday, the ridge starts to build in. We got one more piece of energy that is coming down the front range of that front side of that ridge with low pressure over south central Canada. No moisture to work with. It's basically going to be more of a dry frontal boundary passage as most of the flurry activity remains to our east. And then as we get on the day on Friday, we start to see that ridge building into our region. All the cold air shifts into the eastern and central Corn Belt as high pressure starts to dominate much of the western United States. And we are looking at some very warm temperatures starting to build back in and return to the 40s and 50s, and maybe even warmer temperatures as we go into next weekend as the core of that high pressure starts to build toward the east. The 8 to 14-day forecast indicates the cold conditions to our southeast, basically associated with that low pressure system in terms of precipitation. With the high moving in, drier weather is in store.
Thanks, Al. Back to trivia now, and this week we asked, how many gallons of water will an acre of corn give off per day through evaporation? If you guessed D, 4,000, then you got it right. Pretty impressive number. Next up, now is a very exciting time to get involved with the University of Nebraska Extension's on-farm research. Through the use of a $1.2 million USDA grant, corn and wheat growers from Omaha to the Panhandle could soon have an opportunity to gain first-hand experience with cutting-edge technologies. It could allow them to more precisely identify the amount of nitrogen fertilizer their crops need while keeping excess nitrates from ending up in the state's water supply. Market Journal's Bill Dodd has the story.
Well, thanks, Troy. You know, one thing I catch myself saying quite frequently is, the future is now. With new tech hitting the market on what seems like a daily basis, there's always some competitive edge to be gained by employing new practices or new technologies. Now, this grant, which was awarded by the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Natural Resource Conservation Service, could give several corn and wheat producers across the Cornhusker State a one-of-a-kind opportunity to improve their farm's management as well as land stewardship. This particular grant is primarily geared toward on-farm research trials, and the focus of this particular trial is nitrogen management and leveraging new ag technologies that are available in order to accomplish that outcome. Nebraska Extension Educator Laura Thompson joined me and gave me a quick synopsis of the types of technologies producers can expect to work with throughout the trial.
For producers, I think it'll really give them an opportunity to get some experience with some different technologies that could help improve their nitrogen management, things like crop canopy sensors, aerial imagery, different models that have come out, some things that could help them more precisely manage their nitrogen potentially, as well as giving them the opportunity to try some different production systems. So maybe moving some of their nitrogen application to in season rather than all prior to planting. So some opportunity to try some different timings with their nitrogen that can be more efficient, as well as trying some things like maybe variable rating their nitrogen. So maybe applying different amounts in different parts of the field that need more or less nitrogen. So really a good opportunity for them to get hands-on experience, trying out some new technologies, trying out some things that maybe they wouldn't necessarily have had the opportunity to get their hands on and see how they work in their own farm operations. For us as a research and extension team, this is really a great opportunity for us to help them get that experience with the technology, as well as try to refine some of these technologies, see where they're going to fit better, maybe certain soils or certain practices or crop production systems they might fit better with. So really a great opportunity to see these in a lot of different environments as well.
And when it comes to new tech in the aerial imagery arena, this grant utilizes the cream of the crop. Long gone are the days of relying on the old eyeball test. With the nearly limitless potential of modern aerospace innovation, collecting field data has never been so precise or so much fun to collect.
Yeah, so within the aerial imagery, there's some different options that producers might look at, anywhere from a drone with maybe a multispectral sensor on it to an airplane or to satellite imagery could all be something they could look at. Using that to monitor the crop's progress, have some area of the field that has a higher nitrogen area that we can use as a reference, or a lower nitrogen area to alert us to upcoming crop nitrogen need, and then using that imagery to direct spatially variable nitrogen recommendations.
One factor of the trial is researchers would ideally like to collect data while applying nitrogen in season. Laura says this method of practice and ensuing data collection could potentially yield information that could lead to more precise field predictions and management practices.
Yeah, so one of our goals with nitrogen management, if we go to in-season nitrogen management, we have a lot of opportunity to refine our management based on what's happening during the growing season. So we can use things like what weather has already occurred up to that point where we'd make the in-season application. We can use modeling to predict what might happen. We can use the crop canopy sensors to see what's going on, and all that can help drive the nitrogen application that's being made in season. So we get a lot more information when we can move to that in-season application, start incorporating data that helps us see what's actually happened that specific year and in different portions of the field to really make a more precise management of nitrogen.
Not only will producers have the benefit of using cutting-edge technology, but with real-time data being regularly gathered by researchers, research participants will also have the benefit of knowing when and where to apply nitrogen, and more importantly, when and where not to apply nitrogen, potentially creating an economic and environmental benefits.
Yeah, so there's potential that it could save nitrogen application by reducing nitrogen applications in areas of the field that it's not needed, or just reducing excess nitrogen application that maybe is occurring. So there's potential for an economic benefit as well as an environmental benefit, which is really important by reducing the amount of nitrogen that could be lost to the environment through things like leaching.
And like I said earlier, the future is now. So if you're interested in becoming involved in this particular research, there is one stipulation. In order to be qualified for this trial, participants must be EQIP, or Environmental Quality Incentives Program eligible. Now, for more information, you can visit cropwatch.unl.edu, and while you're there, you can also find out about some upcoming farm research result meetings. Upcoming meetings include a February 26th meeting in Kearney at the Buffalo County Extension Office, February 27th in Alliance at Knight Museum and Sandhill Center, and February 28th in York at the Holtis Convention Center with a special focus on cover crops and soil health. So, Troy, that's what I've got my eye on this week. I'll send it back to you.
Thanks, Bill. Finally today, the importance of pesticides can't be overlooked. They help save food by preventing crop damage, and they even have the ability to help improve our health by keeping down the populations of mosquitoes and other parasites. However, we still need to think about our safety as well as the environmental impact when it comes to pest control. That's why Nebraska Extension is offering its annual Pesticide Safety Education Program. If your license is set to expire this year, there are a ton of chances to get recertified or attain your initial certification. One benefit of these classes is that the instructor is local and has a good sense of what most producers in the area are accustomed to.
So private applicators, when they go to training, those trainings are put on by their local extension educators, and so those educators, aside from probably knowing the applicators themselves on a personal basis. They know the area, they know what crops are being grown there, and so they kind of have a specialization in cropping techniques in that area, and so they kind of get that unique area-specific information for their own area.
Class sizes and seating availability at these events can vary between commercial applicator and private applicator sessions. If there's an event near you, the sooner you can get registered, the better.
Class size and seating at these sessions varies by location, and so if you're a commercial applicator looking to register, you'll want to go online, and we have a list, we have a schedule on there, and so you can register online. And if you're a private person wanting to go to a session, then you'll usually have to call your local extension office, and so they'll sort of be able to tell you whether or not there's room or not. But so yeah, I would encourage you to get registered as soon as possible.
If you're in need of pesticide application certification, there are a few upcoming events you should know about. Initial certification classes are February 25th in Columbus, Grand Island, Norfolk, and Scotts Bluff, February 27th in Lincoln, North Platte, and Scotts Bluff, and March 17th in Beatrice, Lincoln, Norfolk, and North Platte. If you're looking to recertify, your next chance is March 10th, with sessions being held in Beatrice, Holdridge, and Norfolk. For more details on these and other training sessions and specific locations, you can visit pested.unl.edu. We've got that link on the Market Journal website too. That's going to do it for this week's show. Before we go, we did say last week that Mike Briggs would be on the show today. Unfortunately, we couldn't bring you that story this week, but we'll be sure to have him on again real soon. If you missed a story, be sure to download the Market Journal mobile app or follow us on social media to join in on the conversation. Hope to see you right back here next time. I'm Troy Moling. Thanks for watching.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.